Iran is warning its military may retaliate, threatening a wreckage and a reckoning. An Iranian military spokesperson saying no port in the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman will remain safe.
It really is too easy, almost suspiciously easy, because folks, it is only day 3 of this blockade, and we now have Iran, if some recent reports are to be believed, formally surrendering their control over the Strait of Hormuz. Of course, it goes without saying that for the past several days, Iran has had no control over the strait. We have, but apparently negotiators are now even offering behind the scenes to formally sign a piece of paper that says, we do not actually control the Strait of Hormuz. We're not going to continue this illegal harassment, bribery, and extortion on international waterways, which is completely hilarious because we just remembered a couple of days ago when the Iranian negotiators left Pakistan completely defiant that they were going to continue their control. Of course, we've been told by the Iran propagandists for several weeks now that the U.S. suffered a severe strategic defeat and humiliation because Iran controls the strait and there's nothing America can do about it. This is a true quagmire. And notice how, first of all, Iran never actually controlled the strait. They were simply ruling by fear. But secondly, it turns out the U.S. could have broken Iran's control over the strait this entire time. It's called simply call their bluff. The moment that you start to mess with Iran's oil money, it turns out their own economy cannot even survive that. And so this is what we now have, apparently a breakthrough in negotiations, and that only took about 72 hours of this blockade to get these yapping dogs called the Iranian regime to actually come to the table. Simultaneously, their economy is already beginning to feel the shock. We have the government not even wanting to try the U.S. blockade at this point. They're effectively telling all petrochemical exports, all oil tankers, don't even attempt to resist the United States at this point. It is a complete and total surrender. And simultaneously, I'd like to further point out that while this is all happening in the Middle East, while we're technically still at a state of war somewhat, and the global energy shock is still absolutely real, our stock market is just casually hitting all-time highs. So just in general, it's a bad day to be a panicking. It's a bad day to be these people who think, oh, this time we got Trump. Trump really is not going to figure his way out of this one. Oh, he usually does. It's usually actually a good strategy to just trust the plan every once in a while. But I want to start collecting receipts at this point, right? Where are all the people who told us for weeks that there's no way America would have gotten Iran to relinquish control of the Strait of Hormuz, right? Where are all the people who said they're going to permanently keep on tolling and America lost the war because of the strait? That's the argument so many people used. Okay, so who lost the war now? I'm sure they'll find another reason why the Iranians won, right? The Iranians won because they collected the fighter pilot's underwear, allegedly, or something like that. Totally ridiculous. But anyways, we'll tell you about these full developments here in today's video, what's currently going on with the blockade. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. As I've been saying in the past few videos, we're currently facing a attempted left-wing censorship campaign. So we would greatly appreciate it if you would just subscribe, turn on notifications, so that way we can fight any harassment and shadow banning that takes place here. And nonetheless, that said, let's get into this. So first and foremost, let's contrast Iran's words with reality. Okay, so here is the Iranian foreign minister coming out recently and claiming that the U.S. cannot enforce a blockade on Iran. But you notice that the U.S. can indeed enforce a blockade. They are enforcing a blockade, and the Iranians aren't actually doing anything about it. So some of the tough guy rhetoric here, if you want to call it tough guy rhetoric for Iran standards, is not even backed up by reality. Take a listen. Look, Iran cannot be blockaded, 1. 2, if you fail in a diplomatic process and then try to use another tool to apply pressure, you will certainly fail again. Yeah, well, it turns out, I guess we can indeed enforce a blockade. Funny how that works. And don't get me wrong, the guy's certainly fuming. But you notice how his argument effectively boils down to, it's mean of America to do that, it's not diplomatically nice. That's a huge toning down from what we saw before, because we had the IRGC initially threatening they would use force against American naval ships if they were crossing the strait, calling it unauthorized, and then now we're simply getting Iran saying, America shouldn't do that. It's bad. We're not going to honor that in diplomacy. Okay, but are you going to do anything about it? Well, we've watched for 3 days as the Iranians have done nothing, and now they're not even really saying anything about it. It's very interesting how easy it was to get these people to stand down. Again, why is that significant? Why is it happening? Because we're messing with their money. As I said in our past several videos, when you starve off the money supply of corrupt autocracies, these people change overnight. They can say all they want about jihad, ideological revolution. They want their freaking money. And when the economy takes this hit, and by the way, a lot of that oil money's going back to the Iranian government officials, this is exactly how it goes. So if you find it at all surprising, you shouldn't. It's really actually quite in character. Follow the money. You cut off this country's money, which, you can bomb them. You can do all this other stuff, right? Once you mess with the money, they completely change overnight. So that's noteworthy to point out. But anyways, as it pertains to the blockade, it turns out, again, America is 100% actually indeed enforcing it. You can see these headlines. Apparently, a U.S. destroyer today just interdicted 2 oil tankers that were attempting to leave Iran. Here is the statement from U.S. Central Command. Yesterday, an Iranian-flagged cargo vessel tried to evade the U.S. blockade after leaving Bandar Abbas, exiting the Strait of Hormuz, and transiting along the Iranian coastline. The guided missile destroyer USS Spruance successfully redirected the vessel, which is now headed back to Iran. 10 vessels since the start of Monday have now been turned around, and 0 ships have broken through since the start of the U.S. blockade. Today, by the way, President Trump posted the following video on Truth Social that shows some of the audio of our naval tankers.
The U.S. has announced a formal blockade of Iranian ports and coastal areas. This is illegal action. All vessels are advised to immediately return to port if leaving, and discontinue transit to Iran if that is your next port of call. Do not attempt to breach the blockade. Vessels will be boarded for interdiction and seizure, transiting to or from an Iranian port. Turn around and prepare to be boarded. If you do not comply with this blockade, we will use force. The whole of the United States Navy is ready to force compliance.
Now, what's interesting is that Iran's Navy has been making very similar statements to that, except here's the difference between America and Iran. America can actually enforce those words. Iran's Navy is literally making those statements from the bottom of the sea where their naval ships are currently sitting. So just something to keep in mind. It's not just cool propaganda videos. It's backed up by the fact we've actually been turning back these vessels. And as of today, it would appear that Iran has effectively gotten the point. They might have tried to get a few ships through to see if we were bluffing, but now their government has just made the announcement they are suspending, I should say, all petrochemical exports until further notice, basically telling their oil tankers, don't leave port anymore. Just, we're done. We get the point. We're not going to try it. They've completely stood down to the U.S. blockade. Let me put it that way. And apparently this is even going on behind the scenes, ladies and gentlemen. So according to a new report just a couple of hours ago out of Reuters, Iran is now completely backtracking on their whole idea of controlling the Strait of Hormuz or illegally annexing an international waterway. Let's repeat what we said in the beginning. A couple of days ago in Pakistan, they were remaining completely firm on this position. It was a source of the breakdowns besides nuclear weapons. The other big disagreement with America and Iran was the Strait of Hormuz. And in the span of literally about 3 to 4 days, all of a sudden, total 180, just because we blockaded them for 3 days and showed we were serious, right? It's interesting how I don't know what Iran was thinking. I don't know why they thought like we couldn't do this the entire time. Maybe they thought we were bluffing. Maybe they thought we weren't doing it. But yeah, the very moment that we just blockaded and shut down their oil exports for 3 freaking days, now they're saying, okay, fine, we'll give up the Strait of Hormuz. So here are those details. Iran is offering to let ships pass freely through the Strait of Hormuz all of a sudden. No more tolls, no more extortion. They've now proposed allowing vessels to sail through the Omani side of the strait without risk of attack as part of the ongoing negotiations with the U.S. Well, hey, that might create some crowding issues, I guess. You know, I'm not sure the exact logistics of that, but so let's, again, keep in mind, thus far, Iran has been claiming they control the entire strait. Now, the strait is half Iranian, half Omanian, right? Now they're basically saying, okay, as long as any oil tankers of the world sail through this side of the strait, as you can see on my mouse right here, they're free to do so. We're basically backing off on this whole toll system, and only the ships that are linked to Iran, essentially, right, like Chinese oil tankers, ships going to Iran, those will fall under our control, under our rules. But if you're trying to sell oil to the rest of the world effectively, we'll let you do that, and we'll agree not to attack. So in my opinion, that's a total and complete surrender. I mean, after all, I don't really care if Iran is putting tolls on its own oil tankers. Like, that's their own tax system. We don't care. We don't care if they're forcing China, which buys 80% of Iran's oil, to pay tolls. I mean, that's China's problem, not ours, right? So, that is what it is. But again, if they're basically, this statement, if you read through the lines, is effectively saying, right, that on the non-Iranian side of the Gulf, they're willing to just relinquish their fake alleged control altogether. And that is, of course, big. And that, by the way, is a sign of what? We'll repeat, Iran beginning to blink because they're panicking over the economic devastation of this naval blockade. That's what needs to be hammered home again. It's not just about America showing force or something. America's shown plenty of force. We've dropped a lot of bombs over Iran. Notice how the moment we just cut off the money, they're talking to us in a much different way than they were before. So what happened to that? What happened to Iran controlling the strait, huh? Now they're even proposing, it's one thing to de facto relinquish control because you're not doing anything, and they've already been doing that the past several days, right? Iran never has controlled it throughout the U.S. blockade. But now they're even formally saying, okay, we're willing to effectively not control the Strait of Hormuz. What happens to all the people who said that Iran was winning, huh? That Iran was in control? Very, very interesting. So that's, again, a major concession. And it doesn't stop there, because we now have President Trump hinting, he's been hinting all week, to watch tomorrow and the coming days over in Pakistan, hinting that new negotiations here could be coming at any minute, and declaring that the Iran conflict is effectively over in itself. Take a listen.
President Trump is confident enough that a peace deal between the U.S. and Iran can be reached in the next couple of days that he told a New York Post reporter on the phone just now to stay put in Islamabad, near where the Pakistan peace talks are taking place. The quote is this. The president said, "You should stay there, really, because something could be happening over the next 2 days, and we're more inclined to go there. It's more likely." You know why? Because the field marshal is doing a great job.
So yeah, there you heard Trump dropping some pretty strong hints, and I don't think he's exactly bluffing, because we can correlate that with the actual tangible U.S. success in the Persian Gulf right now. The blockade is indeed working, and I really think, as we said yesterday, that Iran is in the position where they effectively right now have no choice other than to make a deal or completely collapse as a country, which of course means the regime being kicked out of power anyway. Because people often ask the question, how can you trust Iran? Don't negotiate with the terrorists, etc., etc. That's generally the case, yes, because thus far, throughout most of history, this predates Trump, we've seen that the typical Iranian strategy is to just try to run out the clock, right? They extend it for as long as possible. They filibuster. They say a bunch of crap. They're never telling the truth. You literally just cannot trust a word these people say. And that's an issue when you're trying to have a good faith negotiation. You can't have a good faith negotiation with Iran. The only language these people truly know is force, and by the way, taking away their money. See, that's what makes this different. That's why I say this time, maybe as compared to before, you can trust Iran a lot more in the deal. Not because they're being good faith, not because they're nice people, but because once you actually threaten their money supply, and you've shown America can do that, right? You mess with us. It's not, do you think these regime leaders really care if their citizens or their military targets are getting bombed? Absolutely not. But they do care when their money's being cut off, when the coffers that they're getting kickbacks for from the oil sales, right? When that gets ruined, and by the way, that also has downstream effects on the economy, which is going to cause civil disruption and even more protests and a powder keg of instability coming for an already weakened regime. This is a situation I would argue these people are desperately trying to avoid, which is why the moment that this blockade began, we saw effectively a total panic, a total running in circles, flailing, retreatish strategy from the Iranians. They're talking way differently in negotiations. They're not even trying to break the blockade. There's a total panic effectively going on. Yesterday, we told you about how the president is basically erupting on his negotiating team, saying, how dare you not make a deal? Our economy's not going to survive this. We have completely flipped the script on Iran. No longer is it in their favor or their strategy historically to filibuster or run out the clock. Time right now is not on their side. They only have 2 weeks to make a deal, or else they're going to have to start turning off oil production altogether, as we laid out yesterday, because they have no storage facilities. Within the span of about 30 to 45 days, considering how reliant Iran's economy is on oil, you could be looking at total economic and even political collapse. Very important there. These people don't have a lot of time. They don't have a lot of options. And to answer people's reservation or, the skepticism there, that's why I believe right now Iran might make a deal they wouldn't make before. Not because I trust them, but because they're literally panicking because we're messing with the money. Follow the money. You want people to get serious? Start talking money. Pretty universal rule for human beings, but especially when dealing here with the Iranians. Simultaneously, of course, if you want to see the other tangible signs of how successful this blockade is, well, first of all, we do have some modest drops taking place in U.S. oil prices. Yesterday, it went down to about 88.90. As of today, it's at about exactly 90, but still, right, starting to see an overall trending down. Some confidence within the market that perhaps this is coming to an end. And by the way, the fact that some oil under U.S. supervision is now flowing towards Western markets, that's also a huge contributing factor to, lowering some of the supply and demand pressures. But simultaneously, and perhaps more importantly, we just got the announcement today, ladies and gentlemen, believe it or not, that the S&P 500 has just hit its record high at 7,001 points. That's right. We're not talking about it went back to its pre-war levels. No, a record high, which might seem confusing or counterintuitive considering all that's happening in the world. Why are investors so confident? We'll explain that in a second.
Overtime, and I'll see you tomorrow.
The bell's bringing an end to the trading day at the NYSE. Stag Industrial ringing the bell, and at the NASDAQ, Mako Mining doing the honors. Welcome to Closing Bell Overtime. We are live from Studio B at the NASDAQ market site. I'm Melissa Lee along with Mike Santoli. Stocks mostly higher once again today. Small loss for the Dow. But here's the headline. The S&P 500 closing at a record. Its first close above 7,000. The NASDAQ with its 11th up day in a row also closing at a record. First close above 24,000. Much more in the market straight ahead.
So yeah, a pretty big development and happening amidst wartime at that. What is going on here, you may be asking, because let's not forget that the doomsdayers told us by now we should be at $200 oil, $6 gasoline, a total global recession. None of those things have actually materialized. Rather, it seems that the more reserved view that this is going to work out, everything's going to be fine, is coming to fruition. By the way, if you're asking how a U.S. naval blockade in the Middle East is creating record high stocks and increased consumer, or I should say specifically not consumer, investor confidence, let's explain what's happening here, right? Why does the U.S. blockade give so many investors in the United States and even around the world a renewed confidence that this is going to work out? Well, first and foremost, I think it fundamentally shows that America actually did win, right? The Strait of Hormuz has been in limbo for the past several weeks, and yes, there's a lot of prominent, even the people on the pro-Iranian side trying to argue that because Iran was claiming to extort and claiming to control the strait, that means Iran had, of course, lost, and there were a lot of people, let's not forget, that were saying the U.S. has no ability to open the strait. And so yes, long term, when you look at the global economy and you understand, oh, it's basically in control of the Iranians, and they can just start shutting that down, blowing up oil shipping at any moment, then that creates a lot of economic uncertainty. However, the U.S. has just effectively dispelled that myth. We have gone in and said, no, Iran doesn't control the strait. And even if they try to control the strait in the future, look at what we just did now. We are showing this control is completely fake, and now you're even hearing them from a diplomatic side, that being the Iranians. The Iranians are even coming to the diplomatic table and saying, all right, maybe we're willing to make a formal signed deal even that doesn't control the Strait of Hormuz. That's big for investor confidence. And by the way, for the very reasons we've laid out, right? Why there's now so much economic and financial pressure that was on Iran that wasn't there before. Likely, you would also assume there's a strong investor confidence that, as Trump is saying, the war is more or less over. This is coming to a close very soon. And of course, for all of this, knock on wood, right? Let's all hope that Iran doesn't do something stupid and it's just we have to prolong the whole situation. But I would say right now we're in a good position, right? We truly do have the cards. A lot of people didn't believe Trump a couple days ago when he said that. I don't hear those people chirping too much now, right? trying to say Iran won or something. Rather, I would argue almost, if anything, they're now just saying, oh, America's mean, they're breaking international law or something. Notice how there's just this total change in rhetoric. Yeah, very interesting because, we'll repeat, Iran was never actually winning. So should have believed us when we told you that. But anyways, glad we showed that to the world, right? Anyways, that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. We'll keep you posted on more. But for now, be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.